Hello and welcome. I'm Kate.
And I'm Emily, and this is Beyond the Neurotype,
A podcast that explores what it's like to be human affirming, regardless of labels, considerate of every person's individual needs, and allowing us to, ideally, understand what is behind every individual's actions, choices, and needs.
We do this with curiosity and love as we explore these individual and unique experiences that are rich with challenges, growth, and grace.
I'm Kate, a mental health social worker and synergetic play therapist. I'm the co-founder of the Village Therapy Hub. I'm a mum to 2 adolescents, and I love understanding and exploring what is happening beneath the surface for children and adults, and what behaviours are communicating to us. But let me keep it real. Much like yours, my life is a roller coaster. So I also understand the complexities of being a carer, the challenges of the day-to-day, and I won't pretend it's all enjoyable.
I'm Emily, a neurodivergent mum to a beautiful autistic girl and wife to a wonderful autistic man. I'm passionate about celebrating neurodiversity and creating a community where people are seen, held, and loved for who they truly are. It is my hope that as you listen to the stories of our beautiful guests, you feel inspired, validated, and supported in your journey.
This podcast is recorded on the land of the Dja Dja Wurrung people. We offer our heartfelt gratitude to the traditional custodians and elders, past, present, and emerging, for continued opportunities to learn, reflect, and grow. Hello, Emily.
Hey, Kate.
It's so good to be here today to talk about our latest beautiful conversation with Sarah Middleton from Brilliant Little Gems. It was so lovely to have her and to get to step into a conversation that for me really had me thinking a lot about children as teachers. I kept coming back to, and I just got goosebumps when I said it, because the idea that these beautiful little beings come into our world to help us learn more about ourselves and to deepen our growth as humans and to just give us so much. And I just think about, my little beings and how they were specially selected for me, and that even, all of it is part of my growth, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
And how many lessons I've got to learn along the way that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't have had them or had the opportunity to learn from them.
It's a huge part of the journey with having neurodivergent children and children where life has not been the path that you expected to walk down. And, that kind of double-sided grief that it's not this easy experience, lovely, 100% joyous. There is that, but there is, also the lessons that you learn that you would never have even known that you had to learn until, you have these children just that reflect stuff back at you, and, such a way.
It's gritty, isn't it? And I guess, isn't that what they say, that a pearl is made from the grit that wears it down until it shines? And parenting's kind of like that.
Yeah. Yep. It's not what I thought it would be. But I loved that conversation with Sarah really celebrated that. That even though it's hard, and the journey can really wear us down. Yeah, there are these pearls at the end.
Mm. Yeah. And it's, you know, because even no matter who your child is or what exists in your world with them, there's the balance of the really challenging stuff and the really beautiful stuff. And we're constantly in this dance between those two pieces. And, it is perspective that drives what we see more of in any moment. So if things are feeling really hard and really stuck and really grueling, it's our perspective that there's more of that than anything else that has us feeling really overwhelmed and stuck. But perspective is really, really entrenched and challenging to notice, actually. So there's this kind of constant unraveling that happens on a journey with children. And I don't think this is just as parents. I think having children in your life, whether you're a teacher or, some sort of person that works with children in any kind of context, or you're an auntie or an uncle or whoever you are, the children that are in your world have come to you for a reason to teach you some specific things. And as adults, our job is to be open to the lessons rather than thinking that we are somehow superior or we know more, because often we don't. Sometimes kids are just, not sometimes, always, kids are so instinctive of what their needs are. And when we kind of step back and watch that, their capacity to show us what they struggle with, what they need, what they love is massive. But as adults, we get so caught in this busyness and this need to fulfill things and this outcome that we think we're heading towards that sometimes we miss that.
Mm.
And I know that's certainly been the experience for me as a parent and is often the experience for me as a therapist, that I can get caught in the expectations around me and I can lose sight of the person, the little human that's in front of me.
Yeah, it's so true. So true.
We were talking just before we came on about something Sarah has launched this week that I feel speaks really closely to this. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, Sarah has I love following Sarah on social media. She often has some really thought-provoking pieces there. And this week, she's been sharing about an open letter that her son wants to write to his teachers, asking them to stop using whole body listening and the harm that whole body listening can cause to autistic children or ADHD children as well, and that it's actually not necessary for learning. And yeah, I know she received a lot of support for her son in doing that. And I was messaging her about it and just like, wouldn't it be awesome if all of our autistic neurodivergent community could write an open letter of exactly what it is that the systems around them, school, exactly what it is that's harming them in that environment. And yeah, what a powerful piece it would be if all of our voices were kind of out there at once.
And it's powerful in two ways, isn't it? Because it gives us as the individuals who are going to be writing the letters and the children that are writing the letters the opportunity to sit and think, what do I need? And to actually get in connection with what feels good, what doesn't, what would be helpful, what isn't, which is massive, like a massive thing to have insight about yourself. But also it says, I am not the only one that finds this difficult. Here are the voices. Like, here is the chorus around me that helps me feel really validated in saying what I really, really need.
Yeah.
And I think it's the chorus that gives it the absolute strength and the power to have potential to get attention.
And yeah, just that validation of I'm not the only one asking for this. This isn't uh, um, unreasonable. Like, yeah, I think you can walk such a lonely road when you are experiencing difficulties with things like school, and particularly when the child can't participate in school, because you're not there, you're at home, and so you're already kind of experiencing this, I suppose, disconnection from the community of school, and you don't fit because you're not there, and you're in your house alone. And I think it's very easy to not realize that there are so many other people out there like you struggling with very similar things, and all feeling so incredibly lonely in their place of, yeah, struggle. And it's the work that it takes to advocate for your child. You know, I have one day off, one work day off a week, and I spend a lot of that day in appointments, you know, and the mental load of then having to, you know, justify why you're asking for things and take that to systems like school or, yeah, all sorts of things, and ask for these accommodations and have them not be met. And I think it's a powerful idea as to a wave of us saying why we need it, and how not having certain accommodations are really damaging.
Yeah, and I've seen kids try to do this before. I've worked with and been blessed to know the kids that really, really know what they need, and they try so hard to communicate it. And some of them along the way lose the strength in expressing it because it just feels unheard and unmet. And so then they start to think that they need to adjust and they need to change. I'm thinking particularly of a beautiful now young woman that I've known for a really, really long time. And I've always said that she is going to be an amazing advocate for neurodivergent children when she is older, when people finally listen to her. She has been writing letters at the start of every year to her teacher for her entire schooling life to help them understand what she needs. And she's gone as far as there was times in her upper primary school life where she would write cartoons. She would actually do pictures with her story because she'd found that those individually wasn't working. So she thought, okay, you didn't respond when I just wrote words. You didn't respond when I just did pictures. I'll put them together and I'll try that too. And her resilience, I hate that word, but her continually showing up to attempt to help people understand what she needs. And now she's in the higher years of secondary school, and she's continued every single year to advocate for what she needs. And I will say, to be completely honest about this, that unfortunately she's had to continue to do this every single year because it never gets listened to. It falls on deaf ears. She's had a couple of years where it's been heard and things have been actually put in place and there's been support given. But as soon as that happens, the following year, it all goes away again. So it's something she's had to continue to do for her entire school journey. And I know that she would feel that the chorus of voices would help, that the chorus of voices would make her voice louder and she would be able to feel really heard and understood.
Yeah, I think there's something that you just think about the hope that a child would have in writing a letter like that too.
Yeah.
And just how it makes me so devastated just to even think about that hope being crushed when they realise that, you know, them being so vulnerable and putting their, you know, their feelings and their needs on paper and having this hope that it's going to be heard and then it not being heard. And I know, yeah, it makes me quite upset to think about that. And I hope that, yeah, if there's something en masse that maybe, yeah, those kids, even if they're not being heard and their needs aren't being met, they know that they're not alone in that.
And the frustration that builds, some of these kids go from being so compliant and trying so hard to do what is needed and get through the day and make everyone around them happy. And over time, when they've attempted to let people know what they need and the needs haven't been met, that changes to a feeling of, why don't I matter? Why am I busy helping you feel good and you cannot do these couple of simple things I need to help me feel good? And that grows as the child grows. And their experience then is stepping out into the world or outside of this school environment with this feeling that nobody is going to listen to me when I say what I need.
Mm.
That's an awful legacy to be leaving for our kids.
Yeah. And they just want to stop trying altogether.
Yeah. Because if this environment I was going to for 13 years of my life didn't listen, couldn't hear me, made me feel like my needs were not appropriate, then how can I possibly function in the outside world? Why? Why, once I finally escape that institution, would I step out into the world and risk trying to have my needs met anywhere else? Because the evidence is there's no point in that.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I loved the idea that a little boy had, and yeah, it's quite interesting that we're having this little conversation about how awesome it would be to have some letters out there. And serendipitously, the next day, Hugh van Cuylenburg from the Imperfects released an open letter to parents of neurodivergent children, which is it's a tough watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, but beautiful. And
It's a tough watch because it's the things we don't say.
yeah,
And also because we have this constant, I want to use lots of words, desire, expectation, need, pressure to hold hope. And when we voice just how damn hard it is, there's a belief that that undercuts the hope, while actually both can exist. Hope can exist while we express the hard.
Yeah.
Because expressing the hard doesn't mean we've given up. It doesn't mean we've gone, and now I'm sinking. But it is an opportunity to say, throw me a life jacket. Somebody show up and throw me a life jacket, for goodness sake.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so easy to get lost in that. I know I do it often, when things are hard, it just feels like it's unsurvivable.
Yeah.
And there is no hope. And then it's amazing. In the space of a week, sometimes things can turn around or just one good thing happen and things, turn around and help you get out of the deep water. But, yeah.
And we do have to trust in the fact that we are energetic beings and our energy is constantly in motion. So it is flowing and shifting and changing. And so we're never idle in our energetic states. So even when we feel like we're trapped in the deep, dark, murky water, the energy is still shifting within us. And because our energetic field wants to find positives and negatives to help balance us, it's constantly on the search for something to give us a moment of reprieve. So a big part of it sometimes is just trusting that like, yes, this feels really, really shit right now and it feels like nothing's ever going to change and this is going to be our forever. The only constant is change and things will flow and shift and move around. And even only just for moments. There'll be a moment of something that feels good, a moment of something where we get to feel better.
Yeah. Yeah. I really loved Hugh's letter. And Yellow Ladybugs, which is an organisation more for autistic girls. They wrote their own letter and released that yesterday or to be a few days ago by the time this goes out. But they wrote their own letter to neurodivergent parents, which really spoke to me too. So I would love to see a lot more letters at the moment.
Yeah. And let's really encourage people, if you're hearing this and you haven't seen any that we're talking about, please go and look at the Resilience Project and the Imperfects podcast. It's on both of those social media platforms. Hugh's letter has been put out as a podcast. So something around the middle of March 2025. Who knows when you're listening to this? And then the Yellow Ladybugs social media open letter around the same time. So, Emily, tell me, why do you love it? Why does having letters and people expressing stuff like that feel so lovable to you?
You're not alone.
Yeah.
And I have just for such a long time felt so alone in our struggles. And it is only since I started speaking a little bit more publicly, just, within my own Facebook and my own circles, just very open about some of our struggles, that then people have then seen something and messaged me and, hey, we're in the same boat. Yeah, what are you doing for X, Y, and Z? Getting together, you know, and realizing, yes, we're sitting isolated outside of school in our own homes, but I've now got someone to talk to that gets it, because people don't get it. People say to me, why don't you just force her to go? It's like, well, I have tried that, and that ended very badly. So, I'm not prepared to send my child into another mental health crisis. Thank you. Just from people that just don't get it, and it's so easy to feel like, yeah, everyone's doing these activities at school and picking up these smiling children after school, and, you can't get there, or you get there and the child ends the day by screaming through the gate because they're just so distressed and overwhelmed, and the second that they see you, they just have a meltdown, which was our experience at the start of our schooling journey every day. And people just knew that was, when they heard the screaming, that was my child. And so I think this collective power in us grouping together, realizing we're not alone, and advocating for ourselves and not allowing ourselves to be quiet, because when we're individual, we can be squashed. We're all holding so many things together, and so often so fragile in doing that, because we have so many additional things on our plate to carry, and it's so easy to not want to continue fighting.
Yeah, I often say I have great respect for the parents and great admiration for the parents who wake up in the morning and think, oh, here we go again. Now we have to do it again. And they still get out of bed. Because how easy would it be in that moment to just go, oh, let's just forget it. Like if I don't get out of bed, then none of this has to happen. Like if I don't launch the day, it doesn't launch and we don't have to do all the hard stuff. Maybe today we just give up and stay in bed.
Yeah.
And I just always think how much strength it takes in those first moments when you wake up and know exactly what is ahead of you to still get out of bed and make the choice to start the day.
Yeah.
And I totally see and understand the parents who, who miss appointments or don't send their kid to school that day because it just felt too hard, or don't show up to the thing. Forget about the many things that they're trying to hold. The things just drop out of your brain because you can't actually do all of them or process how to do all of them. Of course that happens.
Yeah, or you turn up for things on the wrong day, which I'm excellent at doing. I'm amazed I made it here on time. I had to triple check my calendar.
For context, Emily turned up a week early to something that we were both going to together and then rang me and said, "Where are you?" And I was at home, nowhere near the place, thinking, am I supposed to be there? What is happening here? Between the two of us, we figured out what was really going on. But things like that, it's so easy to happen. And you know what? For me, that was probably something you really needed, and probably something that you really were looking forward to. And so, of course, your brain bought it early a week because you didn't want to wait. So there's also part of that, that when we really are, because I know you've also done it for a school meeting recently, so I know you're also going to be thinking about that example. Yes. But you also, that was another example of that. You felt great anticipation for that meeting and your brain just wanted to get there and get it done. So, of course, it just told you, let's just go now. Like, And maybe your brain was partly hoping that they would just say, oh, well, you're here now, let's just do it. But we do, our brain does all kinds of interesting things in an attempt to scaffold us and keep us safe. And if things are feeling really overwhelming, it would love to bring things forward for us.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that just when your head is so noisy and there are so many things in calendars and
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it just, yeah.
I often say, I know that, there's all this talk about reliance on technology, but my phone tells me everything. There is an alarm set for everything that I need to do, everywhere I need to be. And I am often surprised when an alarm goes off and I think, oh, I have to do that in an hour. I have it set for an hour before, and then depending on where it is and how far it is to travel, 30, 20 or 10 minutes before. And I have to do that for absolutely everything in my calendar, because otherwise I wouldn't go. I wouldn't be there.
Mm. Yeah, my husband's my alarm, thankfully. So he's like,
I'm so glad his brain is less noisy and can hold all the appointments.
Yeah, lucky him. But yeah, he will often remind me, now this is in the calendar today. Is this still on? Is that definitely the time? So, well, yes, thankfully we have a joint calendar, and he's realised I need some help managing, reminding around it.
Well, I mean, executive functioning is the first thing to go when we get overwhelmed. And I think that's really important for people to know, because that's the thing that we give ourselves a hard time about. When you're just so stressed and suddenly you can't remember how to make a cup of tea, you just stand there looking at the kettle, I know you do something, but I'll be stuffed if I can figure out the first step to making that happen. Or you can't have a shower because bloody hell, a shower's a lot of steps. When you break down the executive functioning in a shower and you have to think about, okay, I need to take off my clothes, put them somewhere, get wet, wash, dry, find something new to wear, decide what that's going to be. It's just, and sensory overload for that, for a lot of those things as well, because if we're already depleted and our executive functioning is low, then our sensory system is overloaded and we're going to be extra reactive to things. But we give ourselves a hard time about our lack of executive functioning at times. But of course, the brain can't do everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it just adds into it. And especially if you've got neurodivergent children, you've generally got neurodivergent parents, often who are not identified or diagnosed as yet. And so executive functioning may already be that bit harder. And then we're layering more need for executive functioning, more appointments, more things to show up for, more things to remember and manage and reply to these already overloaded parents who have potentially, and not always, but potentially less capacity because their executive functioning is, that bit harder to manage. And then, yeah, just loading them with more stuff.
Yeah. And the irony is that these, complicated kids often bring with them a number of people that are extras involved in their life. Not always. Absolutely, there are, let's just address the people out there that are really struggling to get supports and feel very alone and isolated in this, because it's a double-edged sword. While you're alone and isolated, you feel like you've got no one that gets it and you're a sinking ship. And then when you have supports, sometimes that can feel like they're adding weight to your already sinking ship.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. At one stage we had, 4 different professionals involved on top of school. And yeah, one of those is now no longer on our team, and it's actually just a relief. It's one less thing. And yeah, it sucks to kind of not have the support that could potentially bring, but it's also just one less thing to manage and show up for and try and get them out the door to and convince them to go to and keep in the loop. And if, their information's not being shared with the rest of the team, then making sure that it is. And yeah.
Yeah, like you're a PA to yourself and your child and whoever else, and
Yeah.
you end up being this like mini PA to so many people.
Yeah. Yep. And then all the NDIS stuff and yeah. It's a lot. And yeah, I think that's why I was just really happy this week to see some acknowledgement of the carers, and not in a way that is diminishing of the children as well and making them feel like a burden, because our children aren't the burden, the system's the burden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The world is the burden.
The world is the burden.
Culture is the burden. The systemic beliefs are the burden. It's not us.
Yeah.
We, are beautiful humans who have some pretty simple needs at the end of the day. It's just about those needs being able to exist in any place that you are, rather than there being a decision about what needs can be met in what places.
Yeah.
And when we're at home and the needs are not met or supported outside of the family system, they are massive inside the family system. And it takes an extra lot of energy to be able to support that. And this is becoming an increasing problem.
Yeah.
I loved another piece of Sarah's that I also want to talk about, was the discussion around sensory challenges and sensory information, and acknowledging and registering that. Because that's been something for me that I'm really learning currently. Feel like all my nerves are on the outside, and that happens when I get really, really stressed, that I get extra sensitive to sensory stuff. However, I'm not very good at knowing that it's happening at the time, and it's usually not, well, and actually I'd say historically I'm not even that good at knowing that what I then describe as a sensory hangover is a sensory hangover. I put it down to something else, or I give myself a hard time about it, or whatever. And it's a real practice, like noticing the sensory experience, connecting what's happening around me to what's happening in my body, and then giving it enough respect that I can then do something about it. I had a really intense example of this recently. So I had workmen outside my house, and they were putting a line for like NBN. I really thought they were going to fix my internet, but it hasn't. There's been no payoff from the pain, let me tell you that. They were drilling a hole under the road to put this line in. And to be fair, this was like day 2 of having workmen around the house. So probably there was also some stacking that I had no awareness of. But this particular morning, this sound was like this, like just that constantly as they went under the road. And at about the 2-hour mark, I actually recorded a video and put it on my socials being like, someone save me. This is an awful sound. And it ended up going for 4 hours. And by the time it finished at 4 hours, it was like my whole body was pulsing. Like it had almost become a background noise by 4 hours. I probably wasn't even conscious of it anymore. I'd like adapted it into my day, but my whole body was pulsing. And when it stopped, I just went, oh my gosh, okay, that's over. And then thought, okay, that's over. Good. Let's move on with my day. And I went about doing all the things I needed to do. And as the day went on, I started to feel progressively sicker. And it's so interesting too, because this noise was really upsetting me and really overwhelming me, but I didn't leave my house. And I didn't leave my house because I had things happening here that I needed to be attending to. But also it didn't occur to me to like remove myself from the noise, which is interesting within itself. And when we think about that, how often kids will stay in a situation because they feel like there's no option, even though it's feeling really uncomfortable for them.
Yeah, and even I suppose the expectation that they should be able to identify that sensory experience is harming them and remove themselves from it.
That's
which
right.
may
I, as an adult, couldn't do that. I hated the sound. Absolutely, it was too much for me. And it never occurred to me to remove myself from the situation, which I'm sure there are people out there that would be like, well, that's just stupid. Like, but it didn't occur to me. I had too many other things that I was also trying to manage, and I had a whole lot of shoulds about the expectations of the people in my house that needed me, and also, well, I guess they're suffering too, so I should stay and suffer as well. Like, let's suffer together. And so then we left. We actually, just after it ended, had to leave the house and go to a meeting with my daughter. And we were in this meeting and it was really hot in the room. And again, I was like, this is really uncomfortable. This room is too hot. I don't have any water. I'm having to really use my executive functioning. They wanted me to know the answers to really complex challenges that we're facing. And I'm sure they didn't feel complex to them. And they were trying to make it all feel really light. And in the end, it was my daughter who said to me, this needs to end. And I was like, you're absolutely right. It needs to end. Sorry, guys, we've got to go. But, I was pushing through because I'm an adult. These guys need us to do this thing. We have to finish this in my head, which, all the things we do about expectations on ourselves as adults. And then we left that meeting and we needed to kind of do a couple of jobs. And we're in the car driving and suddenly I'm so sick. And I was dizzy and I felt really nauseous. I thought I was going to have to pull over on the side of the road and vomit. And I was like, what is the smell in this car? This car, what is that smell? And my daughter's like, there's no smell. And I'm going, there is. It's an awful smell. Like something's died in the car. And she's going, Mum, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, okay, well, there's a smell and I'm really feeling sick. And this kind of just grew and grew and grew to the point where I stopped at a petrol station because then of course, the empty light comes on my petrol and I'm like, and now we need petrol. Okay, I can do this. So we pull over and I get the petrol and I get out of the car at a petrol station. We all know how overwhelming that smell is. But I actually went, oh, fresh air. I'm going to be okay now. Anyway, got back in the car, got home, did all the things. And then later that day, kept walking over to my daughter who had just sprayed perfume. She came in to see me. She just sprayed perfume. And I was like, oh, my God, get out of here. Get out of my room. Get out of my sight. This is awful. And she's like, what does it smell? And I'm like, no, but I had no insight into what was happening. I felt so sick. And my daughter kept saying to me, oh, you must be pregnant, Mum. And I'm like, well, that would be a weird miracle. Also, though, had my period. So I'm like, I'm actually bleeding and I feel shit. That there is nothing that works here. This is all too much for my sensory system. So let's be true about that. That also was having an impact. And it wasn't until the next day that I woke up and felt better because I actually went to bed thinking I'm crook. I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night vomiting. I must have got gastro. There's something bad going on here. And I woke up the next morning and I was like, oh, I'm not sick anymore. I'm fine. Okay, weird. Went about my day and then started to reflect and thought, oh, hold on a minute. Was I in sensory overwhelm and that was a sensory hangover. And as an adult, I couldn't put all that together and I started thinking about the amount of times I've been with kids or I've experienced kids or I've heard about kids who might be saying, oh, I feel a bit yucky or, I don't really, they express in so many ways what I was experiencing, and I wasn't able to express it, and they're always attempting to express it. And we say, oh, just a bit longer, you'll be okay. Like, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we often just don't realise how affected we are ourselves by our environment. And yes, this expectation that our children need to sustain an environment that is triggering for them, hours on end. Yeah, there's a really powerful example of it.
Mm.
Mm.
Also, though, that we make choices about where we go and what we do. Like, oh, everyone's going to the circus that's in town. As a parent, I should take my kids to the circus because that's like a important childhood milestone. No, it's probably not for everyone. Like there's things like that are like, oh, that's what people do, or that's what you do as a parent, or you are meant to give your kids these experiences. And there's so many environments like that are not conducive to our well-being. Paul, I didn't mean to pick on the circus. That was just the first thing that came to my mind, being a really intense sensory experience. But there's a lot of experiences like that.
Mine was kids' music. We just did not play kids' music in our house at all.
Yeah.
So she could watch ABC Kids or whatever, but it just was an assault on the ears that I couldn't handle. So thankfully that's turned out okay. She likes real music anyway. But
real music.
or the overhead fan in the kitchen, when you're cooking.
Oh, like the exhaust fan.
The exhaust fan. That is such a button for me, and my husband does not get it, and he's trying to talk to me, and then my kid's got something awful on the television that's noisy and loud, and all of a sudden I'm just like, and then the second that fan is off, it's just like, oh, I can breathe.
Yes, I agree. If I somehow miss turning it off in my shutdown of the cooking and I sit down to eat, I'm like, no, the fan's still on. No, I'm the same. The second that it is no longer required, it is off because I just cannot function while it's on. So I'm okay if I'm focused on what I'm cooking and that is my only thing. But if people are trying to talk to me or I'm trying to juggle lots of things, I'm constantly at this that fan makes me reach my capacity of sensory input very, very quickly. And it's probably no accident that you're often in front of the fan at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So you've sensory stacked, which is what I call it. I have no idea if that's a real term. That's what I call it. I'm not going to coin the term though. So if it is a real term, I did not. I probably stole it from somewhere, but it's just what I call it. I do this all the time. I steal phrases and I don't know I'm stealing them. So I'm going to globally apologize for the fact I'm going to do that throughout the podcast. Anyway, I call this the sensory stacking, and it's something we often have no awareness over, and it happens in kids all the time. And then we see the reaction to the final thing that seems like a really small thing, but it just totally flicks the switch. And we do it. It happens for us too. We think we're going along, that we're fine. And then something happens, like turning the exhaust fan on to cook and then someone talking to you, and it just flicks you over. And then you can even say to yourself, oh, here I go overreacting again. Oh, now the witch is out. You can really be mean to yourself about it. In reality, you started sensory stacking from the minute you got out of bed in the morning, and there was that one little thing that just gave a little nudge to your nervous system and made you go, oh, don't quite like that. And then, and it happens. It's you might put on your shoes and they're not quite feeling great, but they go really good with this outfit, so I'm going to wear them anyway. So then I'm going through the day with these shoes that I can tolerate, but they're niggling my nervous system. And then there's a noise that happens on the way to work, or there's unexpected sound, or there's lots of people talking, and all these things grow and grow and grow until eventually we reach our point. And I often say this can happen for kids because sometimes kids have had so much sensory stacking before they even get to school that that's part of the reason that they fall apart as they walk out the door, because they've already put on the socks they don't love, put on the uniform they don't love, had to, eat the breakfast in the way that it's been told to them that they need to eat it, blah, 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 blah. And then they get to leaving for school, and maybe that rush of like anxiety kicks in, or that expectation kicks in, or the prediction about now what that's going to feel like when I get to school kicks in. And that's the bit that just sends a sensory stack over the limit.
Yeah, makes so much sense.
And if we can just even give ourselves the credit for that and notice it for ourselves, that would be really helpful. But imagine if we could also see it in our kids and in the little humans that we come into contact with, that at whatever point in the day we're coming into contact with them, they have had a gazillion sensory experiences before that. Have I said this before? Because I love this fact. Our sensory system takes in 400 billion pieces of sensory data a minute. So, like, think about that. That's massive. And you're aware of like the tiniest fraction of that. So every human that you come into contact with, big or small, has had so much sensory data they've come into contact with before they've met you. And how much sensory data depends on how far into the day it is. And that sensory stacking has definitely happened because there's so many things that nudge our sensory system to feel slightly uncomfortable, and they stack. And then there's some things that cause us to feel immediately uncomfortable, and they don't require any stacking at all. And they're the things we tend to kind of learn and know and avoid. But we can't always avoid them, and kids definitely can't always avoid them.
Yeah.
And sometimes we get so comfortable in the uncomfortable that we actually sit in the things that overwhelm us and upset us because of some other expectation. I was talking to a parent this week whose child, so struggles with noise, and they were at and they leave. We got it set up that they leave school slightly early so that they miss the chaos at the end of the day, which has been a beautiful system and a magic change for them. And I tell you, they leave 2 minutes early from the classroom, supported by the school, and it's the biggest change to their end of day. But this particular day, the assembly was on, and there was things being announced at assembly, and it felt really special, and they didn't want to leave. And so they couldn't leave the assembly. But actually assembly is like really bad for their sensory system. But they had all these shoulds around, but I should be there. I need to hear this thing. Like, this is a special thing that's happening, da, 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 da. And so then, of course, that end of day was a really, really challenging time for them. And sometimes I have to say to parents, like, if your kid's going to go to swimming sports, athletics day, that excursion, whatever, great. If they want to go and that's something they're really wanting to engage in, but just know how much sensory stacking is in place. And when they come home, like, act as if the world is the hardest place for them to be in and facilitate it accordingly, because they are at their absolute max.
Yeah. And I think it's probably for child too, like they don't want to be othered, I guess. And, they're already different by leaving early. And we've, chosen to do that for a while. And it worked really well for us too. But then, my daughter got sick of being different and would rather experience the sensory overwhelm than be different or miss out on something. So if something special and exciting is happening at assembly, of course the kids will want to go to assembly, but knowing that they're harming themselves in the process of doing that because they don't want to miss out or...
Yes. And I mean, I get it. There's probably no way to make assembly a better sensory experience. But imagine if it was like completely normal for everyone to have headphones as an option. And or even everyone has headphones on their person and some have them on and some have one ear on and some have and that was just the way everyone did it. Or actually I remember during like COVID times, a lot of schools had to do their assemblies in their classrooms.
Yeah.
And they would like
do an announcement.
Video stream them through or do it as an announcement.
Yeah.
I don't know that the announcement option was great, but the video streaming, because it's not as loud, announcements can be really loud.
Yeah.
For a lot of kids, that was actually a magic way to do assemblies.
It's funny that you bring this up because this morning, actually, I was remembering when my daughter's school during, early COVID times first attempted a virtual assembly, and it was while we're all learning from home.
Oh.
And just the chaos of that, it was kind of hilarious. One kid figured out how to use like the whiteboard.
Oh.
And the teachers couldn't figure out how to turn it off. And
I love those early Zoom days when we didn't know how to do it, but the kids did, and they could do all the stuff in the background. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know even why I thought of that this morning, but I don't know. How important is assembly? You know, what about assembly is important? Is it recognising the kids that have got awards and and achievements and things like that, and how can we do that maybe in a way that's safer? I don't know. Maybe people come for me now that I've suggested that assembly is not important. But
well, we might learn. Maybe we'll get some feedback that tells us why assembly is important. And that would be really useful for us because we're here to learn and grow. Please, we're always open to feedback. So many things and this was, I feel like we ended Sarah's podcast feeling like there was so many things that it had brought up and we wanted to, continue to talk about. And I think we need to wrap up, but I want to leave with a final thought. And that is what I think ties all of what we've spoken about together. And that's the power of unconditional positive regard and seeing people for exactly who they are in that moment. And I don't know if I've just introduced a really big statement that feels like it needs unpacking, but I feel like I just want to leave with this idea that if we can just take everything everyone comes to us with as information and have a background of, because this is information, it is useful and helpful and of benefit to us rather than annoying and complex and more work for us. It helps us be able to see the needs for what they are.
I love that.
Okay, let's end there.
Thank you, Kate.
See you, Em.
For more information on today's conversation and guest, head to the links provided in the description. Please like and subscribe to keep up to date with more content, and it helps us out with the algorithm too. Beyond the Neurotype is not a licensed medical or mental health service, and any information or advice given is general in nature. Please seek professional help if anything mentioned in today's episode has raised questions or concerns.